brought to you by Petronas Syntium, available at Engen nationwide.
Hello and welcome to highlights of the recent Himan Auto 400 run in the shadow of the Lesotho Mountains. The event was round 7 of the Absa Off-Road Championship.
The cream of South Africa's off-road talent ventured into the unknown on the Himan Auto 400, the penultimate round of the Absa Off-Road Championship. Based at the Black Mountain Hotel near Tabanshu, the event saw National Championship off-road racing return to the area for the first time since the early 90s, and championship contenders were playing for high stakes. Former South African champions Chris Visser and Japie Badenhorst needed a good result to keep alive their production vehicle category title hopes.
I must say this weekend is flat out. This weekend we must do well. Of course, to keep our championship alive. I must say this whole year was good for us. We had 1 or 2 bad luck events, but the whole year was good for us, and we're going to stick to that.
A timely win on the 4x4 Mega World 400 revived title hopes for Chris Visser and Japie Badenhorst. But after leading the championship for most of the season, former SA champion Duncan Vos and Rob Howie had the opportunity on the Himan Auto 400 to clinch the production vehicle title for Team Castrol Toyota.
Yeah, look, we've got a reasonable lead in the championship, but obviously we're going to want to try and wrap it up this weekend as well as we can. We've got to basically beat the Ford.
Production Vehicle Championship leaders Duncan Vos and Rob Howie took the Himan Auto 400 at 24.5-point lead over Chris Visser and Japie Badenhorst, but venturing into unknown territory leveled the playing field and added a little extra intrigue to the event. For competitors, the Donaldson Prologue to determine race grid positions was going to be an interesting experience.
It's an interesting scenario. First time in the Tabanshu area in years, virgin terrain, and we have to go find it. So I feel a little bit like Kingsley Holgate at the moment.
There is a huge investment in South African off-road racing and some very expensive and sophisticated production vehicle machinery lined up for the Donaldson Prologue. The Prologue was run over a 62-kilometer route that took crews from race headquarters at the Black Mountain Hotel towards Matlatla and Yorkford, and proved to be one of the fastest of the season. The Prologue also produced one of the closest finishes of the year.
Looking for their first win of the season, the Team Castrol Toyota Hilux pair of Anthony Taylor and Chris Birkin got their weekend off to a promising start by winning the Prologue, but it was the narrowest of margins. Only 1 second separated Taylor and Birkin and the Ford Racing Ranger in the hands of Chris Visser and Japie Badenhorst, with Visser and Badenhorst finishing only 3 seconds ahead of Vos and Howie in the second Castrol Toyota. It meant just 4 seconds separated the first 3 cars.
Local residents were enjoying themselves and added a touch of colour to proceedings, while out on the route, RFS BMW crew Hannes Grobler and Henny Tersteege picked up a place when Paki Lambeschagni and Rikus Erasmus moved aside to let the veteran former South African champions go through. Grobler and Tersteege will retire at the end of the season after distinguished careers, with Grobler a multiple SA champion in circuit racing, rallying and off-road racing. The RFS BMW finished 47 seconds behind Taylor and Birkin and was followed home by the PS Laser Nissan Navara of off-road legend Alfie Cox and German co-driver Jürgen Schroeder.
There were pockets of local spectators throughout the route, and a little further back in the field there were other close battles, with the Bloemfontein crew of Lou de Bruin and Rian Greiling in the Rubicon Ford Ranger finishing only 5 seconds ahead of Willem Vos and Werner Weiss in the Fossies BMW X3. The Rustenburg crew were only 6 seconds ahead of Pretoria youngsters Christian de Plooy and Henk Janssen van Vieren in the second RFS BMW. Chasing after them were Gary Bertolt and Ralph Pitchford, who were only 8 seconds adrift in the Atlas Copco Toyota Hilux.
The Regent Racing pair of Mike Whitehouse and Matthew Carlson were pushing hard, but a left front tyre puncture 6 kilometres from the end did nothing to help the handling of the Nissan Navara. The flat cost Whitehouse and Carlson precious seconds, and they finished 2 minutes and 28 seconds adrift of Taylor and Birkin.
There were also lost seconds for Lance Woolrich and Ward Huxtable, who were struggling to find a rhythm in the second factory Ford Racing Ranger. Despite having at their disposal a roadbook, GPS and route marking, even the most experienced crews sometimes have a little difficulty finding or staying on the right route.
That way? No, that way.
The Himan Auto 400 saw Paralympic swimming legend Natalie du Toit change from a swimsuit to race suit to make her off-road debut alongside experienced Archie Rutherford in the SA Warranties Nissan Navara. The pair appeared to be thoroughly enjoying themselves and even had time to crack a joke or two.
A little further back in the field, Class D honours went to championship leaders Cliff Weichelt and Johan Smallberger in the N1 4x4 Toyota Land Cruiser, while KwaZulu-Natal crew Rowan Lamb and Lyle Parker scored a maiden prologue win by taking the Class E honours in the X-Factory Ford Ranger.
After the Donaldson prologue, there was plenty of activity in the pits as service crews went to work. With the championship at stake, Anthony Taylor reflected on a job he had to perform for the Castrol Toyota team over the weekend.
No, I've got a job to do, and that's we want to finish first and second in the championship. So, you know, if Evan comes past us early in the beginning, I'm not going to chase him. He must open the road, and then hopefully he doesn't go wrong and let us follow him. We must just keep our heads clear, and hopefully we can pull it off this weekend.
With just 4 seconds separating the 3 production vehicle championship challengers in the Donaldson prologue results, the scene was set for an explosive Himan Auto 400 with BMW, Ford, Nissan and Toyota all represented in the top 10.
The championship issue in the special vehicle category was also delicately poised with the title chase, a 2-horse race. Championship leaders Evan Hutchinson and Donnie Stassen took to the Himan Auto 400 a narrow lead over Johan van Staden and Mike Lawrenson and were concentrating on simply finishing ahead of their title rivals.
I'm watching Johan. I've got to see. I'm racing Johan this weekend. You know, it's a 2-horse race for the championship, so it's pointless racing anybody else. It comes down to can be difficult. You know, if you're in a position where you want to win the race, but it's unnecessary to race someone who's not in the championship race. You've almost got to let them go and concentrate on I'm racing Johan. That's it. I've got to stay ahead of him and finish ahead of him in the 2 races, and that's it.
There is very little to choose between the top teams in the Special Vehicle Championship, and after 6 rounds of the ABSA National Series, there had been 6 different winners. It underlined the competitive nature of off-road racing in South Africa and the importance of picking up a good grid position on the Donaldson prologue. Botswana-based Keith du Toit and Lesotho co-driver Ashley Thorne made a hesitant start to what is effectively a race within a race, but out on the route, brothers Lawrence and Gerard du Plessis had built up a head of steam in a Zarko Magnum. Based in Wolmaranstad, the brothers were looking for their 2nd win in a row after a dominant performance on the 4x4 Mega World 400 at Carnival City on the East Rand.
Championship leaders Evan Hutchinson and Donnie Stassen in the Motorride Bat Venom were 47 seconds adrift of Lawrence and Gerard du Plessis. What will have pleased Hutchinson and Stassen was the fact that teammates Nick and Ryan Harper in a 2nd Motorride Bat Venom and the PHB Bat of husband and wife team of Marius and Yolinda Fourie formed a buffer between them and Johan van Staden and Mike Lawrenson. The gap between Hutchinson and Stassen and the Atlas Copco crew in 5th was only 34 seconds, but in off-road racing, catching and passing are different kettles of fish.
After a disappointing season, reigning South African champions Herman and Wichert Sulwald were looking for a good result in the Elegant Fuel Porter. They finished the prologue only 3 seconds behind Johan van Staden and Mike Lawrenson, but were pushed all the way by Class P championship leaders Colin Matthews and Alan Smith in the Century Racing CR3. The ever-spectacular Matthews and Smith were only 2 seconds behind the Sulwald father and son pairing and 33 seconds ahead of Class P championship rivals Richard Fuller and Dennis Murphy in the Regent Racing Bat.
A flat tyre halted progress for the 2nd father and son Elegant Fuel team of Quinton and Cully Sulwald. It wasn't a happy afternoon for the 2-time South African champions, with the flat and mechanical maladies dropping them down the special vehicle running order.
By the time the Silvalds were mobile again, they were under attack from Nardus and Louis Alberts in the Rapsa bat. It did not take long for the Alberts father and son team to go steaming past, and the Silvalds eventually finished a disappointing 20th among the special vehicles.
Service crews were again put under little pressure after the special vehicle prologue. Winning the prologue overall was also going to place extra pressure on the Duplessis brothers, with first on the road casting them in a pathfinding role for the crews behind.
Môre dink ek nou die eerste stuk die time trial se stukkie sal lekker werk, maar daarna dan moet jy nou pad maak. Nou die ander ouens het nou weer 'n voordeel wat jy kan opvang. So ons gaan maar sien môre hoe verdwaal ons. Dan is dalk ons beurt.
The prologue results saw motorride crew Hutchison and Stassen where they wanted to be, ahead of Van Staden and Lawrenson, but only 34 seconds separated the championship contenders.
A field of almost 70 production and special vehicles made for a colourful scene at the ceremonial start to the Himan Auto 400 at race headquarters at the Black Mountain Hotel on the outskirts of Tabanchu. There was a good turnout of spectators and off-road enthusiasts from Bloemfontein and surrounding areas. And after being based in the Free State capital for 2 years, the decision by the South African National Off-Road Association to move the race to Tabanchu was favourably received.
The Himan Auto 400 was run over 2 loops of 170 kilometres, with the first 60 kilometres taking in the route for the Donaldson Prologue before crews headed in the direction of Tweefontein and uncharted territory. As was to be expected, Donaldson Prologue winners Lawrence and Gerard Duplessis took full advantage of a clear road ahead to make the early running at the front of the field and in the special vehicle category. The Duplessis brothers were being chased by the Ford racing pair of Visser and Badenhorst, who had quickly moved into the lead in the production vehicle category. With the cars around 50 kilometres into the route, Visser and Badenhorst had opened up an 18-second lead over championship leaders Force and Howie in the Team Castrol Toyota Hilux.
As to why Visser Badenhorst and Force Howie were 1-2 on the road in the production vehicle category was soon apparent when Hutchison and Stassen went past prologue winners Taylor and Birkin in the second Castrol Toyota. A puncture delayed the Toyota crew, and in a cautious start to the race, special vehicle championship leaders Hutchison and Stassen were overtaken in quick succession by reigning SA champions Herman and Wichard Silvald, Marius and Jolinda Fourie, and motorride teammates Mick and Ryan Harper.
With an eye on the championship situation, Evan Hutchison and Dani Stassen were still ahead of title rivals Johan van Staden and Mike Lawrenson in the Atlas Copco bat.
There was early drama for Class B leaders Colin Matthews and Alan Smith in the Century Racing CR3. The pair hit a ditch at high speed and after a few anxious moments pulled off the route with a punctured right rear tyre.
In their penultimate race before heading off into retirement, veterans Grobler and Testege were 2 3/4 minutes behind the 2 production vehicle frontrunners. The RFS crew were now being chased by Taylor and Birkin, who were back in full flight in the second of the Team Castrol Toyota Hilux entries. Behind the 2 production vehicles, the Regent Racing pair of Richard Fuller and Dennis Murphy had taken advantage of the Matthews-Smith mishap to move into the Class P lead.
Some close battles had developed throughout the field, with the Rapsa bat of Nardus and Louis Alberts running just ahead of Alfie Cox and Jürgen Schroeder in the PS Laser Nissan Navara. Cox and Schroeder were lying 5th amongst the production vehicles and had dropped 5.5 minutes behind the leaders. The PS Laser Navara was running at the front of a little train of cars that included the Rubicon bat of Bloemfontein crew of Peter Ruthven and Leander Pinard, who were under pressure from the Lesotho crew of John and Sharon Moore in a Chenauth. The Chenauth is a little technology disadvantaged when stacked up against the more recent Bat and Porter models, but the Moors were doing a good job of staying ahead of the Ford Ranger of Louw de Bruin and Rion Greyling. Behind the Bloemfontein crew, Neil Meyer and Joseph Lewis were having a steady outing in the Zarco Challenger and holding on to a top 10 place amongst the special vehicles.
There was high drama when amateur cameraman and race engineer Jean Els was in the right place at the right time to capture Willem Vos and Werner Weiss roll the Forces BMW X3 in spectacular fashion after hitting the same ditch as Colin Matthews and Alan Smith before them. Next on the road were Christian de Ploy and Henk Janssen van Vieren, who before continuing made sure the Forces crew needed no assistance. Before they were back up to racing speed, the RFS BMW crew were passed by Mark Corbett and Rudy Balzar, with the Century Racing CR4 throwing up a shower of dust and stones.
On the production vehicle front, a terrific midfield battle had developed between a trio of cars. Regent Racing pair of Mike Whitehouse and Matthew Carlson were nearly 8 minutes behind the leaders, with the Nissan Navara crew under pressure from Picky Labuskachny and Rikus Erasmus in the Rubicon Toyota Hilux. Right behind them was the Ford Ranger in the hands of Lance Woolrich and Ward Huxtable, with the Nissan Toyota and Ford separated by only 15 seconds. Behind the three production cars, Matthews and Smith were back in business in the Century Racing CR3, but a bad day took a turn for the worse for the Class B Championship leaders.
Their race was run when the CR3 parted company with the right rear wheel. The pair were only 54 kilometers into the race and could only look on in frustration as Class D leaders Cliff Weichelt and Johan Smallberger and Class E leaders Rowan Lamb and Lyle Parker went past the stricken Century Racing entry.
Too soon into the race. It was a big jump right in the beginning. How we didn't roll over is totally beyond me. But the faces of the spectators was more smiles than I had in the car. But if Colin wasn't driving, I don't believe we would have rolled it. Well done, Carl. Looks like Fossey rolled directly behind us. As we got out, Fossey was on his wheels, but he had rolled on that same bump.
The wreck of the Fossey's BMW was a stark reminder of the perils of off-road racing, with Willem Vos and Werner Weiss escaping serious injury. The drama on an incident-packed morning was not yet over, and the run back to the designated service park and a 15-minute compulsory stop at race headquarters at the Black Mountain Hotel was to produce more intrigue.
People often ask me how it feels to hold the Currie Cup. It's a huge honor. For 120 years, men have put their bodies on the line to win this cup. And yet, you never know until the last game, the last minute. One sidestep, one blistering turn of pace, one miraculous drop kick can change it all. It's only when the final whistle blows that the heroes' names can be engraved in the history books.
The ABSA Currie Cup. My team, my passion.
This is Heroes TV. It's your life. Rise to the occasion. Join us as we celebrate our African heroes with the inside story to their success. All sports, real people, real time. It's about time.
You sit for 5 hours on a seat the size of a shoe and shave your legs for safety, not for show. If scars and grazes are the norm and not the exception, then welcome to the club. For all local and international news, info and past and future events, and all the insight you need into one of South Africa's fastest growing sports, join our experts on Super Cycling every Tuesday at 7, exclusive to SuperSport, and powered by Engen from start to finish.
Hold your breath, for speed is all you need. The FINA World Cup Championship, live on SuperSport, your world of champions.
With only 10 kilometers to the designated service park, there was some hectic racing at the front of the field where production vehicle leaders Visser and Badenhorst in the Ford Ranger were playing musical chairs with special vehicle leaders Lawrence and Gerard du Plessis in the Zarco. Tucked in behind the Ford and the Zarko were Force and Howie, with the Castrol Toyota crew having the best seats in the house when Visser and Badenhorst went past the Zarko. The Du Plessis brothers then returned the favour in what was an interesting little cameo.
The husband and wife team of Marius and Yolinda Fourie had settled into a solid second place in the special vehicle category in the PHB BAT. They were 47 seconds adrift of the leaders and had 12 seconds in hand over championship leaders Hutchinson and Stassen, who had steadily worked their way back into third in the Motorrad BAT Venom. Battle was also raging between Hannes Grobler and Henny Tersteege in the RFS BMW and Anthony Taylor and Chris Birkin in the Castrol Toyota Hilux. The two crews had shadowed each other for most of the morning and were running just ahead of Richard Fuller and Dennis Murphy, who had taken control of Class P. Behind the Regent Racing pair, Neil Mayer and Joseph Lewis in the Liqui Moly Zarko were being kept busy trying to hold off Cox and Schroeder in the PS Laser Nissan Navara. Making up a little train of cars were Herman and Wichard Solwald in the Elegant Fuel Porter, with the pair having dropped back a few places after running as high as second.
The sudden demise of the Liqui Moly car was unexpected, but they were not the only ones with problems.
Ja, ons voorste linkerwiel, ek weet nie waar hy is nie. Weet jy om nog eens weer nou weggerol het of wat nie.
After a long walk, Louis Alberts finally located the errant wheel, but a somewhat bizarre incident put the Alberts father and son combination out of the race and lifted the steady Mark Corbett and Rudy Balzar up a place in the Century Racing CR4. Corbett and Balzar were now running just outside the top five and were being chased by Bloemfontein crew Peter Ruthven and Leander Pinard, who were keeping the local flag flying in the Rubicon BAT. There was more drama when a puncture 20 kilometres from the compulsory halt dropped Johan van Staden and Mike Lawrenson down the race order, with the title initiative slipping back towards Evan Hutchison and Dani Stassen.
Back to the production vehicles, and while Sun City 400 winners Christian Deploy and Henk Janssen van Vieren were out of the production vehicle championship picture, the Pretoria-based RFS BMW pair were locked in a fierce battle with the Regent Racing Nissan Navara of Whitehouse and Carlson. The two crews were separated by only 21 seconds, with Whitehouse and Carlson being chased down by Woolrich and Huxtable in the second Ford Racing Ranger entry. After a disappointing prologue, the Ford pair had managed to slip into a much better rhythm.
After a disastrous start when a wheel fell off the car on the way to the prologue start, Clint Gibson and Gary Campbell were making up time. The KwaZulu-Natal crew overhauled Class P pair Kutsia and Sandra Labuskachny in the Raconic Zarko, with both crews going past the Elegant Fuel BAT of Quinton and Kali Silvart, which had expired. Also making up ground were Terence Marsh and George Smallberger in the second Regent Racing Nissan Navara.
Brothers Lawrence and Gerard Du Plessis were the first car into the designated service park at the Black Mountain Hotel for a compulsory 15-minute halt at the end of the first loop of the race. It's a hectic time for service crews who have to carry out either minor or major running repairs to cars that have taken a beating. Drivers and co-drivers also take a beating, and for them the halt offers a short respite before battle is resumed.
In the production vehicle category, Chris Visser and Jaapie Badenhorst were locked in a huge battle, with championship rivals Duncan Foss and Rob Howie, with just 7 seconds separating the two cars after 170 kilometres of racing.
It wasn't quite as tight in the special vehicle category, where the Du Plessis brothers had a 47-second cushion over Marius and Yolinda Fourie, with Evan Hutchison and Dani Stassen a further 12 seconds adrift.
Into the second and final loop of the Himan Auto 400, with brothers Lawrence and Gerard Du Plessis on track to pick up their second win in a row in the Zarko Magnum. After winning the Donaldson Prologue, the pair had not put a wheel wrong during the race, but was still being hounded by production car leaders Chris Visser and Jaapie Badenhorst. The Ford Racing crew had been under intense pressure from championship rivals Duncan Foss and Rob Howie, but it held their nerve to stretch the gap between the Ford Ranger and Castrol Toyota Hilux to 36 seconds. A change in race order in the special vehicle category saw championship leaders Evan Hutchison and Dani Stassen move into second place in the Motorrad BAT. With Marius and Jolanda Fourie in trouble, the father and son team of Nick and Ryan Harper were now in third in the second motorized Bat Venom and provided more championship protection for Hutchison and Stassen.
The third place battle in the production vehicle category finally swung the way of Anthony Taylor and Chris Birkin in the second of the Castrol Toyota Hilux entries. They now had a comfortable cushion over Hannes Grobler and Henny Tersteege, with the RFS BMW pair settling for a solid fourth rather than heroics. Behind them, Johan van Staden and Mike Lawrenson had staged a comeback in the Atlas Copco Bat, and fourth place would mean dropping only 2 championship points to Evan Hutchison and Dani Stassen. The Atlas Copco crew were around 2 minutes clear of Harman and Richard Silwald, who were coming under late pressure from Mark Corbett and Rudy Belzer, who were having a strong race in the Century Racing CR4.
The local flag was still being kept flying by Bloemfontein pair Peter Ruthven and Leander Pinnard in the Rubicon Bat. They had also moved ahead of the unfortunate Marius and Jolanda Fourie with 2 punctures, dropping the PHP Bat from second all the way down to 8th. Behind the Fouries, a huge battle was on the go between 3 production vehicles. Elfie Cox and Jürgen Schroeder were under attack from the RFS BMW of Christian de Ploy and Henk Janssen van Vieren, who in turn were under attack from the Ford Ranger of Lance Woolridge and Ward Huxtable. It was tense stuff, and at the finish, the 3 crews were covered by only 10 seconds.
After their unfortunate start to the race, the KZN pair of Clint Gibson and Gary Campbell did well to work their way into the top 10 in the Gibson Racing Porter. A steady run had taken Mike Whitehouse and Matthew Carlson into 8th amongst the production vehicles, with the Regent Racing teammates Richard Fuller and Dennis Murphy taking a top 10 finish and Class P honours in the special vehicle category. It was also a result that puts Fuller and Murphy in the Class P championship picture with 1 event to go.
A trademark performance took the ever-steady Terence Marsh and George Smallberger into 9th place among the production vehicles in the second Regent Racing Nissan Navara, and Paralympic swimming star Natalie du Toit marked her off-road debut with a top 10 finish alongside Archie Rutherford in the SA Warranties Nissan Navara. The Class D battle produced a first win of the season for brothers Johan and Werner Horn in the Mullilan Toyota Land Cruiser, and Dirk Pitter and Koos Claessens wrapped up the Class E Championship with their 6th win in 7 outings in the 4x4 Mega World Toyota Hilux.
At the finish, the checkered flag was out for Lawrence and Gerard du Plessis, who made it 2 wins in a row. They were followed home by the motorite bats of Evan Hutchinson, Dani Stassen, and Nick and Ryan Harper, and the Atlas Copco bat of Johan van Staden and Mike Lawrenson. All it meant, as the traditional bubbly sprayed, was the championship fight would go to the final event of the season.
Vanoggend het ons die tandtrou was lekker oop geweest en daarna toe sukkel ons bietjie. Toe moes ons die pad maak. Maar ons het bietjie verdwaal hier en daar, maar eventually toe was dit baie lekker. Kry ons die route bietjie, ons GPS het bietjie rondgeneek, maar baie lekker.
The final winning margin for the du Plessis brothers was a comfortable 2 minutes and 7 seconds. Further down the finish list, Richard Fuller and Dennis Murphy were the only Class P crew to sneak into the top 10.
It was also a 2nd win in a row for the Ford Racing pair of former South African champions Chris Visser and Jaapie Badenhorst, who held off a determined challenge from Duncan Foss and Rob Howie in the Castrol Toyota Hilux. More important was the fact that their 3rd victory of the season would take the championship fight with Foss and Howie to the final race of the year.
Yeah, I guess we could have asked for anything better. Today was excellent. Yeah, the whole day was unbelievable. This morning we started just behind Anthony, and they made a small navigational error and we went past him, and thank you, Jaapie. No, I appreciate it. And from there on, yeah, we tried to stay in front, and the whole day was just perfect.
The battle between the Ford and Toyota crews was enthralling, and in the end, just over half a minute separated Visser Badenhorst and Foss and Howie. On a fast event, the top 10 was made up entirely of Premier SP class vehicles.
Next week on Inside Off-Road, we meet Paralympic swimming legend Natalie du Toit and look back on the Hyman Auto 400. You can't afford to miss the action on Inside Off-Road.